Up there, youth participation in politics has become a popular area of contemporary discourse in so many countries, especially Nigeria. Most young people are now more politically active and are calling for their voices to be heard in decision-making processes. A professor of history and political science at Lincoln University, Pennsylvania, Daryl Poe, joins me now to discuss more on this. Thanks for joining us on the news. And it's good to see you. First off, what do you think about the place of the youth in Nigerian politics and governance? Do you think they even have a place, or there's a deliberate attempt to exclude them from the process of governance?
Well, if by youth we are talking about that group of humans that really are around teenagers to up to 40 years old. Usually that's been the African interpretation of youth. And I would say that historically youth have led the independence movements. I mean, when Zeke was a youth, it was at that time that he was writing those enticing articles, encouraging people to organize across the oceans and across Nigeria to get power. Nkrumah, who he recruited to the school that he graduated from with his BA, also was a youth as he was moving the masses of people in the Gold Coast colony to seek independence from Ghana. When Mandela was arrested, he was a youth. I think I could even take it deeper and to say when Jesus was trying to make us follow God, he was a youth. So I used the last one metaphorically to show that I think that the youth always have in their power the opportunity to improve the societies they live in.
Well, that's historically you could say so.
Yes.
But in today's Nigeria, there seems to be a deliberate attempt to keep them out. Of course, now you have the not too young to run bill that's being put forward before the parliament, and it is hoped that that bill will actually be passed. How can Nigerian youth ensure that they're not left behind in the scheme of things?
They have to figure out how to use the technology that they represent. If anything, we can say the Nigerian youth, like the African youth in many other countries, including the United States, are the cell phone generation. So first they have to get out of the sense that merely sending a text of protest is an actual movement, but to use that text to communicate with their own generation that there are more things they can do. The other thing that they need to be able to do is to be joined by some elders who really respect the energy of the youth and the potential of the youth, so that the elders can share the wisdom but not block the motion and the creativity that youth can bring to political change. I've spoken at a number of campuses in this past week for Black History Month. Of course, in the United States we call it Black History Month, but in Africa it probably should be called African Liberation and Unity Month, and it should be celebrated every month. But I've spoken at a number of campuses here, and the youth at every campus I've gotten up to that I've spoken at has asked me, well, all of this history, how does that help them seize control of the challenges that face them? And I told them if I knew that answer, then we wouldn't be having the presentation. I would have just done it for them. But what they have to realize is just like there was a Zeke and there was an Nkrumah, and before Zeke and Nkrumah there was not a Zeke and Nkrumah, they have to become the new Zekes and Nkrumahs. And maybe, just maybe, they'll figure out how to use that cell phone, which is attached to them like an umbilical cord, to make this revolution happen.
What about the issue of money? You hear a lot of young people say, look, this leaders that we're trying to get out of the way, they have too much money that you can't. Where do you even begin from? Well,
people make the money that somehow those wealthy people have. So once the people have the consciousness that they make the money, they can decide the direction of the money. So I think that this is the job of the youth through cultural productions, artists that sing, dancers, visual artists. They need to make a message that moves the masses of the people to seize control of their own destiny. And it can happen. We've seen it happen before. It's just that they have to develop the self-awareness. They're conscious, but they're not self-conscious. They're aware, but they're not aware of their place inside of these things. And when they were talking to me and asking me these questions, I'm sure that they sincerely want to know, what can I do? But there's this movie that they used to show, I think it was called The Wizard of Oz. And there's this young girl that walks around for like 3 hours on TV looking for a way to get home. And at the end they tell her all you have to do is click your heels 3 times and you could go home. So I think in a way, even though I use that as a metaphor, I think the youth already have the power. They just need to know they have it.
All right, let's move away from Nigeria and look at the bigger picture, Africa. There seems to be a wind that's blowing in Africa right now.
Yes.
The will of the people versus the will of the political class. It's happened in Zimbabwe and now South Africa. What are your thoughts about these latest developments, especially with Cyril Ramaphosa taking over from Zuma, who had to step down?
Well, in my vision, it's finally becoming the era of the organization. And Nkrumah used to tell us, organize, 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 you'll solve all your problems. But still we were kind of wedded to following an individual that was a great elocutor, somebody who could talk well. But I think the ANC is showing us the same thing that ZANU showed us just recently, that they can re-energize their party by showing that they weren't one person, that that in fact they were an organized group. That sometimes works and sometimes doesn't work. But I think that the way forward for us and for Africans all over the world, but especially in Africa, will be the development of political organizations, and then the people will begin to judge the organizations, though. Even in South Africa, I'm really happy to hear that Zuma has resigned and Ramaphosa is now taken over. But I think that he needs to be ready now for what those youngsters in the EFF are going to begin to question the ANC about. Because now it can't be just about Zuma and corruption with Gupta, but now they can look at the ANC and see, is the ANC really providing the hopes that it did as a liberation organization to the masses of people still in need?
All right, let's take it to your home country, the issue of the civil rights movement. Do you think it's needed now more than ever with the developments in your country? Country seems to be a little more divided along race lines and all of that.
Yes, of course, for me, that's where I reside. My home country is here. But I'll talk about that. I think, and a lot of people don't realize this, but there were at least two civil rights movements inside the United States. One that started in 1861 with the Civil War of the United States to bring an end to slavery, and it ended in 1877 with the removal of rights that Africans had gained as a result of the Civil War. No time to go into the details of that, but those who watch our show, I'm sure they'll investigate it. Yeah. The one that's more popular is the one that people call the 1960s, which really started around 1945, and I say ended at 2008. But you realize in 2008 is the year that Obama was elected. But even during the Obama presidency, there were more people of African descent that died at the hands of police brutality than prior to his election. So it clarified for us that just having a black person as the manager of the country didn't change the principles or the behavior of the culture of the country. So yes, is the civil rights movement still going on? Yes, and more than likely, like the earlier period of the civil rights movement, it may change into a black power or an African power element of the movement. Civil rights is when the people are trying to change the general laws and rules of society in terms of how you treat each individual citizen. But the black power movement looks at some kind of self-sufficiency for people of African descent to have civil rights. That
seems to have evolved into the Black Lives Matter movement right now. Yes. Finally, very sad development with the school shootings in the United States. 18 school shootings in this year alone. It's just February, and you've had 18 shootings in schools across the United States. The debate over gun control, it starts when this shooting starts, and all of a sudden it just fizzles out, and we don't hear anything about it until another one happens.
Well, the NRA and the gun lobby is a very strong lobby in the United States, and actually, for your listeners and your watchers, BBC has done a nice short excerpt of the past 30 years of mass shootings inside the United States. And it's a real problem psychologically, it's a real problem physically, and I'm hoping, because I like to see a lot of people from Africa come to visit the USA, that the USA doesn't get put on an endangered list, a dangerous place to go list, which could happen. What I think happens in terms of the gun lobby is a very interesting phenomenon. Africans, people of African descent that live in the southern part of the United States would fight also for their rights to keep their guns because they've used their guns to protect themselves from racist mobs. But in urban areas, guns become a dangerous thing for all people because usually the youth that have the guns, they don't even practice shooting and they, by mistake, shoot up a lot of people they don't plan to shoot up. But these kinds of serious psychological problems are the ones that really should call for some kind of gun control. But from what I've heard in the news,
it's possible that that might be at the root of this seemingly uncontrollable use of a gun, especially in school environment.
most of these mass shootings, people have bought their...
When this shooting starts and all of a sudden it just fizzles out and we don't hear anything about it until another one happens.
Well, the NRA and the gun lobby is a very strong lobby in the United States. And actually for your listeners and your watchers, BBC has done a nice short excerpt of the past 30 years of mass shootings inside the United States. And it's a real problem psychologically, it's a real problem physically, and I'm hoping, because I like to see a lot of people from Africa come to visit the USA, that the USA doesn't get put on an endangered list, a dangerous place to go list, which could happen. What I think happens in terms of the gun lobby is a very interesting phenomenon. Africans, people of African descent that live in the southern part of the United States would fight also for their rights to keep their guns because they've used their guns to protect themselves from racist mobs. But in urban areas, guns become a dangerous thing for all people because usually the youth that have the guns, they don't even practice shooting and they, by mistake, shoot up a lot of people they don't plan to shoot up. But these kinds of serious psychological problems are the ones that really should call for some kind of gun control. But from what I've heard in the news,
it's possible that that might be at the root of this seemingly uncontrollable use of a gun, especially in school environment.
most of these mass shootings, people have bought their guns legally. So I think it's the psychological illness that's the cause of these shootouts. And somebody needs to get deep into the psyche of residents of the United States to see why is it when you have a problem with something, you feel the need to kill everybody you have a problem with.
I'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Professor of History and Political Science, Lincoln University, Pennsylvania, United States of America, Daryl Poe.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. We hope you will oblige us anytime. We'll call on you.
Okay,
again.
great. Take care.
Thank you so much.